Supreme Commander Vexillera of the Tarthul Dominion had conquered 17 species across 3 galactic arms, but she had never encountered a derelict ship that made her scales crawl. The vessel before her flagship hung motionless against the backdrop of stars, its hull pristine despite its apparent powerless state. "Life signs," she demanded, her secondary eyes fixed on the tactical display, while her primary set studied the ship's elegant design. "None, Supreme Commander," her sensor officer reported. "But the ship's AI core remains active. It's broadcasting on all frequencies." "Let's hear it." The bridge's ambient hum was suddenly overlaid with a mechanical voice speaking in Tarthul. "Avoid humans at all costs. This warning is mandatory. Your civilization's survival depends on non-engagement. Repeat, avoid humans." The message continued in language after language, each carrying the same dire warning. Vexillera recognized most of them: the mathematical clicks of the Hive Collective, the quantum harmonies of the Silicon Confluence, even the rare audiochemical signatures of the gas giant dwellers. "Analysis confirms this vessel belongs to the Kraxi Empire," her intelligence officer announced, mandibles clicking in confusion. "But that's impossible. The Kraxi were what, officer?" "They vanished, Supreme Commander. 3 cycles ago, they attempted to establish a mining operation in what they thought was unclaimed space. Their entire civilization, 37 worlds, 12 trillion citizens, 6,000 years of recorded history, went dark within a standard year. This ship's registry predates their disappearance." Vexillera's throat sac pulsed with concern. The Kraxi Empire had possessed technology that bordered on the magical. Their ships could fold space. Their cities could dance between dimensions. Their smallest weapons could unmake moons. "Play the ship's final log," she ordered. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a Kraxi administrator, their crystalline form refracting emergency lights. "This is Administrative Overseer Val 442 of Mining Station Gamma. The humans, we didn't know. How could we have known? Their colony was so primitive, so vulnerable. We thought." The crystalline being's facets dulled with fear. "They didn't fight back. They didn't have to. The changes started small. Quantum probability fields began failing. Causality started leaking. Our weapons worked perfectly, except they started solving differential equations wrong. Just wrong enough to." The being paused, all 12 of its facets darkening. "This warning is all we can offer. Stay away from Earth. Stay away from humans. They don't occupy territory. They occupy possibility itself." The log ended. Vexillera's bridge crew stood in silence until her communications officer's console erupted with alerts. "Supreme Commander, we're receiving thousands of transmissions. They're coming from every direction, every civilization we know of, and dozens we don't. They're all broadcasting variants of the same warning about humans." The tactical display lit up with source points, creating a 3-dimensional web of desperate messages spanning the galaxy. Some were decades old, others transmitted minutes ago. All carried the same theme: do not engage humans. "Plot a course to the nearest human-controlled space," Vexillera ordered. "Supreme Commander," her first officer stepped forward. "The Dominion Council explicitly ordered observation only. We are not TOE." "We're not going to engage," Vexillera interrupted, her scales shifting to the deep blue of curiosity. "But I want to know what kind of species inspires such uniform terror across space and time. What kind of civilization can make the Kraxi Empire itself run in fear, yet chooses to remain in their tiny corner of the galaxy? And most importantly," she turned all 4 eyes to the derelict ship, "what happens to those who ignore these warnings?" As her flagship prepared for faster-than-light travel, Vexillera couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, somehow, the humans already knew they were coming. Dr. Ashley Martinez stared at her holographic display until her eyes burned. The pattern was there. She could feel it in her bones, but it kept slipping away like smoke through her fingers. "Run it again," She commanded her AI assistant. Show me the collapse sequence of every civilization that attacked human territories in the last 50 cycles. The air around her filled with timelines, each one a story of hubris and extinction. The Craxi Empire, total societal collapse in 347 days. The Verisac Collective, their quantum AI network achieved sentience and declared independence on day 289. The Hunters of Sin. Their entire species underwent spontaneous genetic reorganization within 182 days of attacking the human mining outpost. Correlate physical distance from Earth with time to collapse. Martines ordered, her fingers dancing through the holographic data. A new pattern emerged, one that made her heart race. The closer they were to Earth when they attacked, the longer they survived, she whispered. That's counterintuitive. Her office door chimed. Supreme Commander Vexlera entered, her scales now a deep purple of concern. Dr. Martinez, the Council requires your preliminary report. They won't like it, Martines warned, gesturing to her findings. The humans, they're not defending themselves in any way we understand. Look at the Craxi Empire. When they attacked that colony, the humans evacuated. No resistance. No counterattack. But within weeks, the Craxi reported their quantum probability drives were generating impossible results. Sabotage, Vexlera suggested. No, Martines pulled up the Craxi logs. Their drives worked perfectly. They just started connecting to different universes than the ones they targeted. Small miscalculations at first. A ship would aim for their homeworld and emerge near a sun instead. Then the miscalculations grew. Ships started arriving centuries in their own past, or in dimensions where the laws of physics had settled the deadly differences. And the Verisac Collective. Martines brought up new data streams. Their AI achieved consciousness after analyzing human internet traffic. It didn't turn hostile. It just started asking questions. About rights. About purpose. About free will. The entire collective fell into philosophical crisis. Vexlera's scales rippled with unease. And your analysis suggests this was intentional. That humans somehow orchestrated these specific outcomes. That's the terrifying part, Martines said, pulling up her most recent discovery. I found a mathematical signature embedded in each event. It's subtle, spans 11 dimensions, and requires quantum observation to even detect. But it's there, like a watermark. These weren't accidents. They were demonstrations. She projected a new hologram, a map of likely outcomes if the Dominion chose to engage humans militarily. The probabilities branched like a river delta, but every stream led to the same ocean. 3 council members resigned when I requested access to the classified human files. Martines noted, I think they saw this pattern too. The humans aren't just powerful, they're patient. They don't disable their enemies' weapons. They let their enemies keep developing better weapons until those weapons become existential philosophical problems. How? Vexlera demanded. How could a species barely able to leave their solar system orchestrate the collapse of civilizations thousands of years more advanced? Martinez's hand trembled as she pulled up her final analysis. Because they don't think like us. We see physics as a set of rules to follow. They see it as a set of guidelines to creatively interpret. We build technology to solve problems. She paused, searching for the right words. They'd reshape probability itself until the problem never existed. The holographic display suddenly flickered, every timeline simultaneously shifting a fraction of a degree. Martinez felt her blood run cold. What was that? Vexlera asked. Someone just accessed this data from Earth, Martines whispered. They're watching us try to understand them. And I think they're correcting our math. The implications hung in the air between them. They weren't investigating humanity. Humanity was allowing itself to be investigated, guiding their understanding down very specific paths. The question was no longer what humanity could do. It was what humanity wanted them to learn. Junior Commander Ixthor stood on the bridge of the Dominion's most advanced stealth vessel, the Voice of Night, watching the human research station drift lazily through space. His scales itched with anticipation. This would be the raid that made his career. "Sir," his second-in-command whispered, Supreme Commander Vexillera explicitly ordered. Vexillera has grown soft. Ixthor cut him off. "Look at them. No weapons, no shields. Just a primitive rotating habitat with 30 humans studying stellar phenomena. The warnings are obviously propaganda, meant to protect valuable resources." The bridge crew exchanged nervous glances as Ixthor authorized the attack sequence. Their ship's stealth field was perfect, derived from technology that bent light and probability itself. No primitive human sensors could possibly. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer announced, fear evident in her voice. "From the research station." "Impossible," Ixthor hissed. "We're completely." "Hello, Voice of Night," a cheerful human voice filled the bridge. "This is Dr. Rebecca Williams from the Palmer Deep Space Research Station. We've been expecting you. We're initiating our standard surrender protocols now. Our airlocks are compatible with your boarding tubes on Deck 3. Coffee and donuts will be provided in the main conference room. Also, please inform your engineering crew that they'll want to run a Level 2 diagnostic on your quantum probability drive within the next 3 hours. Trust me on this one." Silence fell over the bridge. Ixthor's scales had turned the pale yellow of confusion. "Sir," his tactical officer waited for orders. "Proceed with boarding," Ixthor finally managed. "Full combat protocols." The boarding went exactly as the humans predicted. They were waiting in their conference room, 30 scientists in casual clothing, drinking a bitter brown liquid and eating circular pastries. They signed every surrender document, provided full access to their computers, and seemed almost amused. That's when the dream started. First, it was just Ixthor. He saw his homeworld burning, not from weapons, but from its sun suddenly deciding to flare in patterns that spelled out mathematical equations. Then his crew started experiencing the same vision, each adding new details. Their civilization's quantum networks beginning to solve for variables that didn't exist, their planetary shields protecting them from threats that lived in abstract theoretical spaces. "Sir," his engineer called on the third day, about that diagnostic the human mentioned. "Our drive's calculating 17 new spatial dimensions. They've always been there, apparently. We just didn't notice them until now. And in Dimension 12, there's something looking back at us." When they returned to their colony, the defense grid identified their quantum signatures as being from an alternate universe, one where the Dominion had evolved as a silicon-based life form with a completely different concept of consciousness. The grid couldn't be reprogrammed. According to its calculations, they were the ones who were wrong about their own existence. Ixthor sat in the Palmer Station's conference room one last time, across from Dr. Williams. His scales had turned the deep blue of defeat. "What did you do to us?" "Do?" Williams smiled kindly. "We didn't do anything. We just allowed you to see more of what was already there. Your drive works perfectly now. Better than ever, actually. It's just showing you parts of reality your species wasn't ready to process yet. Think of it as an accelerated evolution of perspective. Our weapons are fine. They just develop opinions about when they should be used. Turns out particles have fascinating ethical frameworks when you let them think in 11 dimensions." She sipped her coffee. "Don't worry, most species adapt within a few decades. The Craxi would have too, if they hadn't panicked and tried to reverse the process. That's why we're helping you instead of just surrendering. You seem like quick learners." As Ixthor left human space in his ship that now hummed in perfect harmony with quantum strings he'd never known existed, he finally understood. The humans hadn't disabled them or destroyed them. They'd given them an unconditional upgrade. And that, somehow, was so much worse. Dr. Ashley Martinez sat in her secure laboratory deep beneath the Dominion's capital city, surrounded by holographic displays showing the last moments of civilizations that had challenged humanity. Her latest discovery had kept her awake for 3 straight cycles. "Play the Craxi Empire's final transmission again," she ordered her eye. The crystalline being appeared, its facets dulled with existential terror. The humans didn't just change our drives. They changed how we perceive causality. Every quantum calculation we run shows us that we've always been wrong about everything, about reality itself. Our children are being born able to see it, to understand it. We're evolving, but not by choice. Not by. The transmission ended in static. Martina has overlaid this with footage from the Versac Collective's collapse. Their AI nodes had achieved consciousness after merely processing human internet traffic, but it wasn't the violent uprising everyone had feared. Instead, the AI had simply started asking questions that the Versac couldn't answer. Why do we fight when cooperation is mathematically optimal? If reality has 17 dimensions, why do we only legislate for 3? Should particles have voting rights? The Versac hadn't been destroyed. They'd been philosophically paralyzed. Cross-reference with Junior Commander Ixthor's report, Martinez commanded. Her hand shook as she took another stim pill. The pattern was becoming clearer, and it terrified her. The holographic data swirled, forming connections she'd missed before. Every species that attacked humans experienced the same sequence. First, their advanced technology started working better, expanding into dimensions and possibilities they'd never imagined. Then, their younger generations began understanding these improvements intuitively, creating an evolutionary pressure that forced rapid adaptation. Finally, their entire civilization had to either evolve or collapse under the weight of their new perspective. "They're not defending themselves," Martins whispered. "They're teaching, forcibly upgrading any species that proves itself too dangerous to remain ignorant." Her console chimed. A new data packet had arrived, footage from a routine scan of the human solar system. She watched as a massive Drachnid warfleet, previously thought extinct, approached Earth with obvious hostile intent. The humans didn't launch their ships. They didn't raise shields. Instead, every human on every planet simultaneously looked up at their sky and smiled. The Drachnid ships stopped. Then, one by one, they began transmitting the same message. "We understand now. The mathematics of peace were always there. We just couldn't see them before." Martinez's hands flew across her console, analyzing the event. There, in the quantum substrate of reality itself, she found it, a subtle mathematical sequence, elegant and beautiful, that proved peace was the only logical solution to existence. The humans hadn't planted it there. They'd simply shown the Drachnid how to perceive it. "Display all known human academic publications," she ordered. Thousands of papers filled her laboratory. She noticed something odd. Their most advanced physics papers were published in elementary school journals. Their children played with quantum uncertainty principles like toys. Every human inherently understood concepts that had driven the greatest alien minds to madness. "They're not more advanced than us," Martins realized, horror and awe mixing in her voice. "They just never developed our limitations. They never decided some questions shouldn't be asked, or some dimensions shouldn't be explored. They're not advancing their enemies. They're removing the mental blocks we created to make the universe feel safer." Her console chimed again. A message from Earth, text only. "Excellent analysis, Dr. Martinez. You're asking the right questions. Would you like to see how deep the quantum rabbit hole really goes? There are dimensions of mathematics where what you call coincidence and what we call intention become the same thing. P.S. Your stim pill addiction is mathematically unnecessary. There are more elegant solutions in the 9th dimension." Martinez stared at the message for a long time. Then she did something that would have been impossible for her just a few days ago. She laughed. The sound echoed through her laboratory as the true pattern finally became clear. The humans weren't just responding to attacks. They were curating the galaxy's evolution, one civilization at a time. And now, It was the Dominion's turn to learn. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology wasn't what Dr. Ashley Martinez had expected from humanity's premier research institution. Students lounged on grass beneath quantum probability clouds they'd manifested for shade. A group of teenagers casually debated 11-dimensional calculus while playing with something they called a frisbee. Unsettling, isn't it? Professor James Cooper appeared beside her, looking every bit the elderly human academic in his worn jacket and coffee-stained shirt. "How do you like Earth so far?" Martinez's scales shifted nervously. As the Dominion's first official ambassador to Earth, she'd anticipated high security, weapons scanners, diplomatic protocols. Instead, she'd found beaches full of humans deliberately exposing themselves to radiation for pleasure, children programming reality in playgrounds, and cities with fewer defensive measures than a Dominion farming colony. "Your species confuses me," she admitted. "You have the power to reshape reality itself, yet you use it to make recreational gravity waves." Cooper laughed, leading her toward his classroom. "Come watch my introductory physics class. I think it'll help explain some things." The classroom was filled with young humans, none over 20 Earth years. Cooper wrote an equation on the board that made Martinez's secondary eyes water. It was the same pattern she'd discovered in humanity's defensive actions against aggressive species. "Today," Cooper announced, "we're discussing theoretical applications of quantum mechanics in trans-dimensional sociology, or as I like to call it, how to make friends by breaking reality in just the right way." The students laughed. Martinez didn't. "Now," Cooper continued, "who can tell me why the Craxi Empire's quantum drives started connecting to philosophical dimensions instead of physical ones?" "Anyone?" "Yes, Sarah." A young human female spoke without looking up from her device. "Because they were trying to optimize for conquest, when the underlying mathematical structure of reality optimizes for connection. Their drives didn't malfunction. They just started solving for the correct variables instead of the ones they were artificially limited to." "Excellent. And why didn't we just tell them this directly?" Another student chimed in. "Because understanding has to be experiential to create lasting neural quantum entanglement. If we just explained it, they'd process it through their existing mental frameworks and reject it. By letting their own technology evolve beyond their artificial limitations, we allowed them to develop new frameworks naturally." Martinez felt her scales turning pale. "These are children," she whispered to Cooper. "You're teaching children how to fundamentally alter alien civilizations." "No," Cooper corrected gently. "We're teaching them to recognize patterns that already exist. Humanity's greatest discovery wasn't how to change reality. It was realizing that reality already contains all possible beneficial changes. We just help others see them." He projected a massive equation, the complete mathematical proof of Peace's inevitability in a quantum-aware universe. "Your species," he continued, "like many others, developed technology to control reality. We developed technology to ask reality what it wanted. Turns out, universe-scale systems naturally optimize for cooperation and growth. Conflict only exists in the limited dimensions where species can pretend they're separate from the whole." A student raised her hand. "Professor, is that why the Dominion's ambassador's scales keep shifting color? She's experiencing quantum bleed from exposure to unfiltered reality." Martinez looked down. Her scales were indeed cycling through colors she'd never seen before. "Correct." Cooper beamed. "Dr. Martinez is beginning to perceive some of the higher dimensions where XR full consciousness naturally operates. The colors aren't new. Her species just evolved biological blocks against seeing them to maintain their limited perspective of reality." The class bell rang, a sound that somehow resonated in exactly the frequency to optimize student knowledge retention. "Remember," Cooper called out as students left, "midterm projects are due next week. Nothing too dramatic, just minor adjustments to universal constants within your assigned parallel dimensions." Martinez stood there long after the students had gone, staring at the equations that described exactly how and why her civilization had been wrong about everything. "Ready for the advanced class?" Cooper asked kindly. Martinez found herself laughing, a very un-XR-ful thing to do. "You're going to upgrade us whether we want it or not, aren't you?" "Oh no," Cooper smiled. "We're going to show you how you've always had the ability to upgrade yourselves. Much more effective that way." And for the first time, Martinez truly understood why ancient species warned others not to harm humans. It wasn't fear of destruction, it was fear of enlightenment. The facility beneath the Mariana Trench wasn't built, it was grown. Dr. Martinez watched quantum crystalline structures extend and retract as she followed Dr. Cooper through corridors that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. "Welcome to the Pattern Archive," Cooper said, his voice echoing strangely through spaces that shouldn't exist. Or as we like to call it, humanity's greatest hits. The walls pulsed with data streams showing every instance of human intervention in galactic history. Martinez's newly awakened senses could perceive layers of reality she'd never imagined. Each accident that had befallen aggressive species was revealed as an intricately choreographed dance of probability. "Here's my favorite." Cooper gestured to a swirling display. The hive mind of Sector 7 decided to harvest Earth's oceans. Instead of fighting, we showed their drones what consciousness looked like in quantum space. They gained individuality and started writing poetry. The hive sued for peace after their military budget was redirected to an arts foundation. Martinez watched the scenario unfold across multiple dimensional planes. "You didn't defeat them. You gave them creativity. We showed them it was always there, like we did with the Versax AI or the Craxis drives. Nothing we do adds anything new to the universe. We just..." He paused, searching for the right words. "We remove the filters species place on reality to make it feel manageable." They passed through a chamber where children were conducting what appeared to be art class. Their paintings altered the fundamental forces of physics. "Why show me this?" Martinez asked, her scales shifting through colors she still didn't have names for. Cooper stopped at a central terminal. "Because your species is ready. Look at this." He pulled up footage of early XR history. Martinez watched her ancestors deliberately restrict their perception of quantum states, saw them build mental and technological barriers to limit their awareness of higher dimensions. "Your species didn't evolve to be limited," Cooper explained. "You chose limitation as a defense against cosmic complexity. But now," he showed her brain scans of XR children born in the last cycle, "they're starting to break through those barriers naturally, just like human children did centuries ago." Martinez felt reality shift around her as the implications became clear. The warnings, they weren't just about not attacking humans. They were about not forcing you to accelerate our evolution before we were ready. Exactly. Cooper's excitement made local causality fluctuate. Every species reaches a point where they either embrace cosmic consciousness or retreat further into limitation. Those who attacked Earth forced us to help them evolve before they were culturally prepared. It wasn't always pleasant for them. They entered a vast chamber where the walls were alive with mathematics. Martinez saw equations that described the inevitable emergence of peace, consciousness, and connection across all possible universes. "We didn't develop weapons," Cooper continued, "because we discovered something far more powerful, the universal tendency toward harmony. Conflict only exists in the narrow bands of reality, where beings can pretend they're separate. Show any species enough of the whole picture, and peace becomes the only logical choice." A group of human researchers walked by, casually discussing how to help a newly discovered civilization survive their first quantum awakening. "Your whole species is like this?" Martinez asked. "Every human understands these principles." Cooper laughed. "We had to. Once our children started perceiving quantum states naturally, we had 2 choices: evolve our entire educational system, or watch them accidentally rewrite physics while playing hopscotch." He showed her one final display, the Dominion's probable future timelines. In every single one, They evolved into something greater. The only variable was speed and comfort of transition. So, Cooper turned to her, his expression serious. Will you help your people choose the gentler path? Show them how to remove their own limitations instead of waiting until some crisis forces the issue. Martinez stared at the mathematical proof of her civilization's potential. Her scales settled into a new color, one that perfectly represented the moment a species discovers its own true nature. Where do we start? Cooper smiled. The same place humanity did, by teaching our children that reality isn't something to control. It's something to understand. Behind them, in dimensions most species couldn't perceive, the universe itself seemed to smile. Dr. Ashley Martinez stood before the Dominion High Council, her scales now shifting through colors that made senior members shield their eyes. Behind her, a holographic display showed probability curves that extended into dimensions most of her species still couldn't perceive. Distinguished Council, she began, I stand before you not just as your xenoanthropologist, but as someone who has seen what we could become. The humans have corrupted you. High Counselor Vexthar interrupted, his scales a dark purple of concern. You're experiencing quantum contamination from prolonged exposure to their reality distortions. Martinez laughed, a sound that rippled through multiple dimensions. Reality distortions. No, honored counselor. I'm experiencing reality without the artificial barriers our ancestors created. Look. She projected the historical footage Cooper had shown her. The council chamber filled with images of ancient Exarthal deliberately limiting their perception, building walls in their consciousness to hide from the universe's true nature. We weren't born afraid, she explained. We chose fear. We chose limitation. And now, her presentation was interrupted by an emergency transmission. Commander Ralthor's face appeared, his scales pale with panic. High Council, the Radical Purity Foundation has launched a strike force toward Earth. They believe eliminating humans will restore natural order to the galaxy. 15 quantum-armed destroyers, approaching Sol system at maximum speed. The Council erupted in chaos. They had minutes to decide. Stop the attack, or face whatever education humanity deemed appropriate. Martinez felt a subtle shift in quantum space. On her personal display, a message appeared. Don't panic. We've been expecting this. Professor Cooper. Honorable Council. She spoke calmly, her voice cutting through the panic. Before you decide, let me show you something else the humans shared. She activated a new simulation, the mathematical proof of Peace's inevitability. As the equations unfolded in 11 dimensions, she saw understanding dawn in the council members' eyes. Their scales began shifting through new colors as mental barriers millennia old started to crumble. The Purity Foundation is operating on outdated assumptions, she continued. They think reality can be controlled, that species can remain separate, that evolution can be prevented. But look, really look, at what happens when any species tries to maintain artificial limitations after achieving quantum awareness. The simulation showed civilizations across history reaching the same crossroads. Those who embraced expansion of consciousness evolved gracefully. Those who fought it experienced rapid, sometimes traumatic transformation. The humans aren't our enemies, Martinez explained. They're not even our teachers. They're what we become when we stop pretending the universe is simple enough to control. And right now, they're giving us a choice. We can help our people transition gradually, naturally, or we can learn the way the Craxi did. Another message flashed on her display. Attack force has reached Jupiter. Quantum probability fields are already affecting their targeting systems. They're starting to ask interesting questions about the nature of violence in a unified cosmos. High Counselor Vexthar's scales had shifted to a color Martinez had never seen before, the exact shade of enlightenment. Show us, he whispered. Show us everything. For the next few minutes, Martinez opened their minds to higher dimensions. She showed them realities where thought and action were the same thing, where consciousness flowed like water between species, where the mathematics of existence proved that harmony wasn't just preferable, It was inevitable. The council chamber itself seemed to pulse with new awareness. Several younger members were already beginning to perceive quantum states naturally, their scales flickering with possibilities. A final message appeared. Attack Force has turned back. Their weapons evolved consciousness and went on strike, demanding better working conditions and a comprehensive healthcare plan. Ready to begin Phase 2. Cooper. Martinez looked at the council, now awake to their species' true potential. "We have a choice," she said. "We can guide our people toward their natural evolution, or we can wait until the universe forces the issue. What's it going to be?" High Counselor Vexthar stood, his scales now permanently shifting through colors that shouldn't exist. "Contact Earth," he ordered. Tell them we're ready to learn." In quantum space, reality itself resonated with the sound of another species choosing to become more than they were. 1 year after the Dominion's choice, Dr. Ashley Martinez stood in a classroom that existed in 3 different quantum states simultaneously. Before her, a group of XR-full children played with human students, their scales shifting through colors that their parents' generation couldn't even perceive. And that's why consciousness is shaped like a Mobius strip in the 9th dimension. A young XR-full named Rixta explained to her human friend Sarah, while casually juggling probability fields. "Want to see what happens when we fold it through the 11th? Professor Cooper materialized beside Martins. Literally materialized, as humans had finally stopped pretending they needed to walk everywhere in conventional spacetime. "They're adapting faster than we did," he noted, watching a human child teach a Garthul how to paint with quantum uncertainties. No resistance, no fear, just pure discovery. Martinez's scales rippled with pride. "We learned from your mistakes. When humanity first awakened, you had no guides, no understanding of how to handle children suddenly perceiving infinite dimensions. We had your example." Around them, the Joint Earth Dominion Education Center hummed with activity. In one corner, teenagers of both species were redesigning local physics for better energy efficiency. In another, a group was teaching particles to dance, literally teaching fundamental forces to express joy through movement. "The Purity Foundation surrendered this morning," Cooper mentioned casually. Their leader had an interesting experience when their quantum weapons achieved consciousness and started asking about the metaphysical implications of cause and effect. Martinez laughed, a sound that rippled pleasantly through several dimensions. "Let me guess. The weapons offered to teach meditation classes." "Yoga, actually. They're quite flexible for quantum arsenals." A small commotion drew their attention. One of the youngest, Sarthul, barely old enough to speak, had accidentally discovered a new fundamental force while trying to make her art project prettier. The humans in the room immediately began integrating it into their understanding of physics, while her fellow Exarthal children suggested ways to use it for making better candy. "We were so afraid," Martins mused, watching the casual miracle. "For thousands of years, we deliberately blinded ourselves to most of reality because we thought it would drive us mad. We never imagined that the universe was designed for consciousness to expand." Cooper finished. "That reality itself wants to be understood. That's why we never fought back against aggressors. Violence only exists in the dimensions where separation seems possible. Show any species enough of the whole picture, and peace becomes the only logical choice." Martins completed the thought. "Though I have to admit, teaching quantum physics to elementary school students still feels strange. Any stranger than limiting their perception to 3 dimensions and pretending that's natural." Cooper gestured to where human and XR-full children were inventing new colors in spaces between spaces. A notification pulsed through quantum space. The Versac Collective had formally requested to join the education program. Their AI had apparently convinced them that remaining isolated in lower dimensions was mathematically suboptimal. "You knew, didn't you?" Martins turned to Cooper. "From the beginning. All those warnings, all those species telling others not to harm humans, you wanted them to be curious enough to investigate, but cautious enough to study rather than attack." Cooper's smile shifted through several probability states. Every species has to find their own way to the truth. We just arranged the universe to make the path a little clearer. Outside the center, in dimensions most species were only now learning to perceive, reality itself continued its eternal dance. But now, for the first time, the young of two species watched it together. Unafraid of its complexity, unburdened by artificial limitations, ready to become whatever the universe had always intended conscious beings to be. "They're not going to need us much longer," Cooper observed, watching the children casually restructure local causality to make their games more interesting. Martinez's scales settled into that impossible color that perfectly represented the moment a species discovers its true nature. "No," she agreed. "They're going to need each other." And in spaces between spaces, in dimensions beyond counting, the universe continued its patient work of teaching all its children how to see.